Hey guys, and welcome back to Battlefront Updates. Today I wanted to talk about another topic that I find to be quite important for Star Wars Battlefront 2, explosive spam. This was quite a big issue in the previous game, as a lot of things introduced at launch were very powerful, such as the barrage, thermal detonator, and so on. They did tone a few of those things down after a couple of patches, but they are still pretty strong if you play the game today. Most of those weapons can kill you from full health, and a lot of people did complain that the explosive spam was a little bit too heavy in the previous game, which I completely agree with. I did some videos before I played Battlefront 2 where I said that I wanted them to reduce the amount of stuff that can one-shot you in the game, so I thought it was a good topic to bring back now after I've played the game and tell you my thoughts on it. And in general, I think they've done a fantastic job on that, because the first thing I tested out in this game was actually how powerful are the explosives, because I went with the assault, which has the thermal detonator, and then I also equipped the barrage as the third slot, meaning that I had two explosives that I could use quite a lot. And even when I had two of those, it was still quite tricky to get kills. I often got hit markers, which makes a lot of sense because they are explosives, but they rarely kill people, especially from full health. At multiple times I could see the nade go off right under the enemy and they still wouldn't die, which at first felt a little bit weird, but then when you were on the other side it was pretty nice to see that your health went down to fairly low, but then if you managed to get behind some cover, you could wait for your health to regenerate and you knew that you actually had a chance to tank those explosives. And I think that's a very good balance. It's not something you should use instead of a blaster in a close quarters fight, because a blaster should beat an explosive, and the points where the explosive actually were pretty effective was inside during the second and third phase, because a lot of those battles took place between two corridors and through a narrow door. So it was obviously very helpful to have explosives in those situations, and I did rack up quite a few kills with the explosives, but that was usually after I fired off the thermal detonator and the barrage after each other, at which point it was simply too much damage for the enemies to take, unless they were heavy with an officer around or something like that. And another thing I can quickly mention is that the barrage doesn't work the same way it did in the previous game, but in this game it actually fires one grenade every time you press, instead of firing all three at once, meaning that it takes a little bit longer to fire off all the nades and it isn't as spammy as in the previous game. And I think they got a pretty sweet spot for the explosives, because now they have a specific role. Whenever people are camped up in a room and you can't reach them with your blaster, well, that's when you should use the explosives. It's not something you should prioritize over a blaster when you are outside, but you should use it to get people who are behind cover, which is how it is in many games, and I think they nailed that pretty good in this game. However, there are some explosives that I think are a tiny bit too strong, and I have mentioned those in previous videos, and in specific it's the Jump Trooper's rocket launcher. I think the wrist rocket for the B2 battle droid is almost as powerful as the one that the Jump Trooper has. The difference is that the Jump Trooper obviously can get up in the air and fire the rocket straight down, which makes it a lot easier to hit people due to the big explosion radius. And that was the one thing that me and a lot of people felt was annoying, that you could instantly die from that rocket launcher and there was no way to counter it. And what really made me sad about that was the fact that the Jump Trooper's blaster pistol is actually pretty powerful and very fun to use, but since the rocket was so strong, most people just used the rocket and then stayed in the back and waited for the rocket to be ready again and regenerated their health, and then they just repeated that over and over. Whereas I would love to see the rocket as a complement, something you can use in some dire situations to help you survive, but then you use your actual blaster pistol as your main weapon, instead of just being someone who uses the rocket, waits behind the corner for 30 seconds and then does it over and over and over. So that was really the only complaint I had regarding the explosives. I thought the other explosives in the game were great, and some that I haven't mentioned yet are things like the detonite charge that both the officer and Han Solo has, and these basically work like remote controlled proximity bombs. I think Han Solo's actually explodes based on proximity, whereas the officer, you need to trigger it yourself. So it's very similar to the death pack in the original Battlefront games, and it wasn't something that I felt was an issue either, so I think the only thing they really need to tweak is the explosives from the special characters. But that is my thoughts on the explosive spam of the previous game and how they fixed it for this game, and I hope they will keep the explosives on a fairly similar level to where it was in the pre-alpha. Thank you guys very much for watching, and as always, may the Force be with you.